government intends to, in the next 3 months, relaunch the Gender-Based Violence and Femicide Council. Minister in the Presidency for Women, Youth and People with Disabilities, Maite Nkoana-Mashabane, says a bill is currently before Parliament to also address the ongoing scourge of violence against women in South Africa. Let's talk about the outcomes of the government-convened Gender-Based Violence and Femicide Summit, which concluded in Midrand in the last 24 hours. We're joined today by Lebo Ramafoko, an anti-gender-based violence activist. A very good afternoon to you, ma'am. Thank you for your time and your patience today. I wonder if those 2 days of discussions between activists and government have left you more optimistic about the way in which South Africa is going to proceed in trying to curb violence against women.
Well, unfortunately, it did not. And the reason why that it did not is thinking back to what led to the summit in the first place. It was the total shutdown that had 24 very clear demands that they wanted government to focus on, which led to the first summit, which we all welcomed. We all really made sure that, we have put the matters on the agenda. We have a second presidential summit, and minister after minister after minister really did not come and address and give a report back on the progress that has been made against gender-based violence. Instead, what happened was a repeat of some of the challenges that many, many activists have been speaking about, and it's a lived experience of many women, of many persons of all sexual orientations and gender identities, people living in rural areas, people who are migrants, people who are living with disabilities, and survivors of GBV. And for me, the question that I think we need to ask ourselves is, do these summits add any value when you are being addressed by a group of ministers who, by and large, civil society for many years, which is why it led to the total shutdown, have actually been calling on some of these issues. So in a lot of ways, yes, people gathered. In a lot of ways, people have been mobilizing. In a lot of ways, the concerns still remains.
But
so I ask myself, go ahead.
Do the concerns not remain precisely because the problem itself is so large and was, unfortunately, given how violent South African society is, never going to be eradicated from 2018 to 2022?
You are correct in saying that it will not be eradicated in 2 years. But what is it from all that the ministers have said that indicate that the promises that were made at the first summit, there has been movement? We are still talking about the backlog in DNA kits. We are still talking about hate crimes. We are still talking about cases that are not being investigated. So when you talk about gender-based violence and this gender-based violence and femicide, and this summit being under the banner of accountability, what do we mean by accountability in South Africa? The call for a council was made a long time ago. So the president was very humble. The president came back and basically said, these are the reasons why the council hasn't been there. But did we need a summit to have another commitment that the council is going to come in 3 months? Now, for me, what I'm saying is that we need to remain critical in a sense that the summit itself is not going to deliver the answers. What we need when we gather again is to make sure that there is progress. We are able to map that when a commitment is made for one thing, when you gather again, there has been progress. When you looked at a lot of the statistics and the numbers that were shared and what activists were saying and what activists were not happy about was the fact that this does not demonstrate that since the first summit there has been progress.
Right. And how will the establishment of the council, which we're told will happen in the next 3 months, help, do you think, in addressing exactly what you're saying, where there's more in terms of promise but less where delivery is concerned?
Well, first and foremost, what this structure will do is that it will be funded. and then it will be a multi-stakeholder council. The council will include resources, but also it will include key stakeholders from various sectors, including representatives of civil society movements and a whole number of stakeholders. At that point, it will basically make sure that there is legislation as well that will govern its operations, and a dedicated council coupled with a national strategic plan will actually make sure that we are all together accounting not only for the activities that need to be done, but also the resourcing of those activities, so that the implementation of various interventions that we know by the work of various organizations that will either will curb the rate of gender-based violence, or will make sure that justice is seen when acts of violence have been committed, are coordinated, and there is some reporting to the council. But most importantly, it's also about the resourcing of this council.
Let's talk about the role of men in fighting gender-based violence in South Africa. President Ramaphosa has said this again. It's not a new comment that's been made about how it is in fact the responsibility of men to make sure that women in this country aren't assaulted, aren't raped, aren't beaten or murdered. How should we go about taking that and making it reality?
So firstly, we need to acknowledge that there is a lot of unlearning of a number of social norms that we have taken as normal in society that increase and perpetuate the levels of gender-based violence. So the idea that men need to be involved, for me, there is a lot of work that needs to be done around what amount of unlearning do men have to go through. Another thing is to make sure that we understand fully how do men become allies. I personally sometimes question how every other group of men will fall onto the bandwagon of saying we are in the fight of gender-based violence, but are not prepared to do the amount of unlearning that needs to happen about how does patriarchy even inform how they show up in the space. How does patriarchy even inform what are the issues that they are interested in and what are the issues that they are not interested in? How does patriarchy, even in the fight against gender-based violence, almost says when we've got a group of men getting involved, we really need to basically applaud them because at least men are doing something. When in fact, the broader social norms that even the men who are saying they are fighting gender-based violence continue to benefit from. I mean, there has been a number of interventions that just shows how even our outlook of doing day-to-day activities when you are a woman or a man basically change depending on your gender. But most importantly, we do know that even amongst men, even when men do work, we tend to sector heterosexual men because even in the way that we do it, we do not look at men in all of their sexual orientations and actually talk about the violence of heterosexual men or men who follow or fall under heteronormativity, treat other men who may not be seen as manly enough. So there is a lot of unpacking in the way that men show up in the space. And I think we need to dig deep and look deep around what is it that men must do. But firstly is owning the fact that there is a lot of unlearning that men have to do, even those that claim to not have been abusive.
Lebo Ramafoko, a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you for your time.